Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. We're experimenting a little bit with our formats, and we're gonna do shorter intros for a little bit, and I'm gonna do some voiceover instead of music in the background. So enjoy this picture. If you like it, please like and subscribe, and thanks a lot. All right, so I've taken my pre-mixed colors here, the greens and the blues. These are two of my favorites to work with. They work well together. I use mostly Rickenbach colors, but these particular ones work well together. So I've layered this, one side green, one side blue, heavy with 2 coats each, and then the space in between, we're going to do 1 coat each of the green on one side and 1 coat of the blue on the other. Just kind of blend that together. This is what I like to do a lot. This is a friction twist. First, I smooth out the surface a bit, and then by pushing back and forth while turning in place, sort of twist up the top half of that bubble. Now, it's not a full and complete twist, because we still have that bottom spotty, but I'm just sort of setting up the shape, and then after a quick reheat, I can take my diamond shears and nip that tip. And while doing so, continue that twist, so I'm bringing that whole design down to a point. I'm very careful to leave these little cutoffs round because kids love these things, and I do go through the process of heat treating them and cold working them, and they sell for $1 in the shop. You know, they're really popular. I tried to put a bubble in here with a quick puff and cap, and there's a little bit of movement, but there's not quite enough. So I went ahead and took a reheat before I did another puff and cap. I wanted to keep the bubble very close to the pipe on this piece, and so I let go of my cap real quick and just pushed that bubble just to the top, or I should say the pipe side. Just a little bit of air in that first half. By keeping that bubble pretty close to the pipe, I'm going to keep the color really well set in the top half later. I love the way these second gathers look on camera. I prefer the paper here. I do have shaping blocks and I do use them. I like the paper because I really like to put my hands on the glass and feel it reacting to my touch, and you can feel a little bit of that with a block, but not like you can with the paper. It's really reactive with the paper, and so I like to feel that. Right now I'm coaxing some of that second gather down to the bottom, smoothing out the sides, kind of shaping the bottom there, bringing it to a tapered point. Give you a little peek at the pattern. You can see those blues and greens. They look different shades of orange. After a quick reheat, I'm going to come out and start pushing that bubble out on the sides. Now, I'm not overly worried about being slightly off center on that initial bubble. This is a much squatter shape than I normally make, and I wasn't thinking about not being able to stretch that down to straight. So once that clicked, I went ahead and grabbed that paper, put on the hose, and started straightening out those sides. I use the paper on this piece a lot more than I typically do, and I often will do that when I'm making a new or unfamiliar shape. I do a lot of squeezing and guiding. Now, I'm a fan of the loose jack line. A lot of people, most people would recommend real tight jack lines, about the size of a dime, no bigger than a quarter. I really don't follow on that train of thought. If I'm making something delicate, I will. Again, there you see me using the paper to sort of clean up the sides while puffing. My O-ring's failing on my hose. It popped off there at the end, so I had to take a quick heat, reset the hose. I didn't really want to get up yet, but I figured why not. Now, because it's such a short, squat shape, I'm just sort of cutting in a guide for what will be the lower shoulder, or I should say the upper shoulder of this piece, and reinforcing that jack line a little bit, squeezing that bottom reservoir into shape with that paper while blowing, keeping that bottom nice and thick. And paddling. I don't use my paddle very often. I did a lot more often when I had assistants helping me more frequently, but it's a tool I rarely pull out anymore. I don't think I realized that it was on fire until I flipped it over. I couldn't really see the flames from the angle I was working at. Now, I noticed my pattern got just a tiny bit off center there, and that happened in the very beginning when that bubble started getting a little bulbous. I don't think I noticed this while I'm working until it's time for the punny transfer. Not that there's much I could do for it at this point. The whole piece ends up on center just fine, but the color pattern does get pushed off a little bit. So it's time for that punny. Notice how wide my jack line is? That's intentional. It's not laziness. I use one of my fat sort of just broadhead punnies. They're just domed at the top. And it looks like that punny stuck really off center, but it didn't. That's just the color pattern. A couple drops of water on that jack line, and it'll pop off pretty cleanly. And the reason I like these thicker, wider jack lines is when I'm making a piece like a picture, I really need the extra material to stretch out. I am choking back that upper shoulder again with the paper. And again, I don't really care that that neck is getting a little off center or oblong. I'll fix that later. I'm very much of the school of thought you just work from the pipe down and correct things as you go if you need to, especially on an unfamiliar shape. My goal is to get that upper shoulder back on center. Now the thickness of the lip that you see right there is exactly why I like broad jack lines. I feel like if they let go from the pipe just fine and clean, then that's all that matters. I didn't trim this piece. I knew I was going to be stretching that lip really wide, and if I had pulled and trimmed or had a tighter jack line, that lip would get a little bit thin. And because it's going to be such a broad flare, I wanted to avoid that. A couple heats in to get that flare the way I want. I'm more cutting the neck in a little tighter there in preparation for the spout than I am straightening the sidewalls or anything. Right there, just making sure my tools are in place. Got that nice and hot, and when I pull the spout here in a moment, watch the heat on that shoulder. I'm gonna find a hot spot, and I'm pulling not just the spout, but I'm pulling from that whole shoulder up the neck and down the spout. That's gonna create a nice clean pour. At least I find that it does. I find if I just pull the spout from the lip, like some people do, and who they seem to have great luck with it, I don't. I end up with pictures that sort of splash instead of pour. So I like to keep that nice and clean. And then I'll go back in and just sort of clean up the edge a little bit, just checking to make sure there's no weird lumps that's going to interfere with the pour. And now it's time to put on our handle. Now this handle is made in one heat. I took a deep flash on the piece and hung it up, gathered the glass for the handle, shaped it on the marver, and then grabbed the piece and brought it straight over. There was no flash in between gathering for the handle and bringing it back to the bench. This is pretty much off the gather and marver heat. Now I'm holding that back pipe in place, but it's rolling, and I'm going to use that. As soon as I cut, I'm going to let it roll. And then there's no flash here. I just dropped the clear glass in the recycle bucket and then sat down and immediately put that handle on. My timing is pretty spot on for these handles. If I waste any time at all, that punny will let go, and that it's already starting to fail, and I expect that going into these. I never expect them to last much more than a few minutes past the handle. Notice here I'm rolling that rod. I'm not just pulling back and forth, I'm rolling it back and forth, and that's going to prevent like sharp angles from forming in the insides of the handles. I don't mean hard angles, I don't mean sharp as in cut you. But it's just a nice smoother grip, a little more comfortable. Just making sure it's set up, pushing it on center, checking it from different angles. I want to make sure it's going to be really comfortable to hold. Notice on the back of that handle, I pretty much always roll them up to cover up the cut spots so that there's no roughness left behind if I don't get a good fire polish. This pops off sooner than I thought it would. I thought I'd have to tap the punny, but it just released. All right, there's the finished picture. This is actually a custom order. By the time you see this video, it will already be in the customer's hands. We're shipping it out today as of filming. So hopefully they enjoy it. It's not a shape we normally make, but it's what the customer requested. They wanted a pitcher and 6 glasses, so that is what we did. If you guys have any questions about anything, shoot us a message. We'll be happy to answer them. Please, if you did enjoy this video, like and subscribe. And if you enjoy that new shorter intro, let me know. We're just still trying to work out what we're doing with the channel exactly for formatting, you know. So we're trying different things, and it helps us to know what you guys like. All right, have a great one, and we'll see you next time.